Well, thank you very much and welcome to everyone, and particularly to our panelists. I'm going to take a very minimalist approach to chairing. That is, instead of introducing the speakers, I'm going to get them to introduce themselves and just to ask them to tell you a little bit about their life since leaving UCL, because all of them studied here at various times. And so we'll start with Catherine, who was a student of human sciences at UCL, and she'll now tell you what she's done ever since.
Yeah. Hello. So I work as a science journalist. I studied human sciences here, and I think I took quite a roundabout route into journalism, which actually took me through broadcasting and PR as well. When I was doing the course, I did a module in science communication, and I quite enjoyed that aspect, and my supervisor recommended a master's in science media production, and I decided I really wanted to get into science documentaries. So I did this course, learned how to make science programs, and I worked for a few years in science documentaries. I didn't love it. I kind of felt like it wasn't quite for me, and I went into PR. I spent a year working for the Royal Society in their press office. And then I kind of realised that my favourite part of my job was writing the news stories for the website. So I thought, actually, maybe I don't want to do PR, maybe I want to write the stories myself. And I was sending press releases out to journalists, and I just thought, yeah, I want to be the person who's receiving this press release. And then I thought about going back to do a course in journalism. And I had a friend who's a science journalist at the time, and he just said to me, if you want to write, the best thing to do is just write. And I think that's a really good piece of advice. So that's what I did, and I started kind of doing a bit of work freelance while I still had my full-time job, which I think is quite a good thing to do when you're starting out. And then gradually I decided to go full-time, and I did an internship at New Scientist magazine. Which was quite difficult to sort of go out of work and then do an internship when I'd already been working for a little while. But actually it worked out fine, and then after that I had enough contacts from doing all those different things, from working in TV and in PR and doing the internship and kind of getting to know the editors and things there, to then go off and start working freelance, and that's what I've been doing since then.
Okay, well, thanks very much. And now Harry, who was a historian at UCL in the old days.
I was a historian, and I lived in 1989. I'm a television film director now, mainly working for the BBC, BBC Two in particular. I've worked for Channel 4 and various other companies. I should apologise for the puff piece, which was taken from my agent's website, which makes my career to look like some kind of inevitable progress to success and delight. And actually, of course, it's indicative of the fact that these things are far more complicated than they appear. A director's career is really a series of jobs, if you're lucky, and one that's intermingled with strange sort of gut instincts, leaps of faith, setbacks, and quite a bit of unemployment. But it's proved a very enjoyable and varied life, which I would recommend if you can deal with the knocks, as you might advise an actor. It sort of started with a failure, really. I read history at UCL and fell in love with acting. I was involved in lots of plays here as an actor and as a director, and it wasn't really until I failed to get into RADA, just on Gower Street, that I decided that filmmaking would be what I would do. And I think it just really happened in a kind of strange intuition that I walked out having been turned down and rejected in one area, and somehow, like in a dream, I walked into the Film Society and asked if I could make a film. And they very kindly said, yeah, if you can write a script, and if you've got some ideas, okay. And I used my friends who had as actors and technicians to help me with it. And I made a short film, which wasn't particularly good, but it decided me that I wanted to make this my career. And I was helped by my head of department at the history department, Wendy Davis, lovely Wendy, she introduced me to Dan Patterson, who was an alumnus, who had developed and produced Whose Line Is It Anyway?, which is a very successful program for Channel 4. And he had been to the University of Michigan on a scholarship from UCL, where he read telecommunications, which is film and TV to you and me, and advised me to try and get on the same thing. And no one knew where the Foreign Studies Office was, so I was the only candidate, and I went. And I spent a very enjoyable year there, came away with a film or two, again, none of which were particularly great, but I came back and spent 2 years in the very cold world of trying to break into a business with just some ability and a lot of determination. And the thing about directing is, to be a director, you have to direct something. And that's not quite so hard nowadays when we have digital formats that are very cheap, but in those days that was quite a challenge when you were working on film. So I plugged away, met as many people as I could possibly do, be polite and nice to as many people as I could. And I worked for a director, John Schlesinger, and eventually I wrote a decent, passable script which I directed with his help, and I had enough money to get to Wales and give no money to a young actor called Rufus Sewell, who was prepared to do it for 200 quid, and he was the only person who was being paid. We went there and we camped in a house and we made a film, and it was an extraordinarily terrifying experience because my producer pulled out. He ran off with this other woman he was engaged with. It was a bit of a mess, and I was stuck in Wales with just a lot of crew and 2 actors who I barely knew, and I was terrified of everyone. Essentially, we got a film out of it. I sold it to UCL, to Channel 4, and I got an agent, and that's how it came about. A series of intuitive choices and some determination, I suppose, and a bit of luck. And then after 3 years later, I got a job on television, and since then I've got a reasonable amount of work, and that's where I am.
Thank you very much. We'll be hearing more later. And now to Sue, who studied Spanish here.
Yes, that's right. It was actually an MA in Latin American Studies, which was associated with the Spanish department. So I actually started off as a journalist working for travel and hospitality publications, and I worked on those for a couple of years. And while I was doing that, I started making contacts with consumer publications on press trips, at press conferences, and I started freelancing for various consumer titles, Sunday Times, Evening Standard, various magazines, homes and interiors magazines and the like. And it was actually at that time I did my MA here at UCL on a part-time basis. In 2000 I got sent to Brussels to cover the Euro 2000 football championships. I wasn't actually doing sort of sports journalism, but it was more of the sort of lifestyle stories around the actual football. And I'd always, before that, refused to go to Brussels because I thought of it as just a very dull, grey, bureaucratic city. And even though one of my best friends had moved there, I'd absolutely dug my heels in and refused to go. But I went with the work in Euro 2000 and absolutely fell in love with Brussels. So when I came back, I said to a friend of mine who did pure travel journalism, I said, why does Brussels get such a bad press? Because it's a really fantastic city. And she said to me, well, I don't know, but the tourist office are looking for a PR manager at the moment, so why don't you phone them up and tell them, you know, what they're doing wrong? So I very cheekily phoned up the director of the Belgian tourist office at the time and said, look, I can tell you how you can get more visitors to Brussels, because there's some great stories and you're just not telling them, you're not getting them across to right media. So I went in and I sat down and I spoke to her for about 90 minutes, and I went through lots of different story ideas, and it was very specific about the publications that they should be targeting with the various story ideas. And at the end of it, she said, okay, that's great, you've got the job. And I said, no, I don't want the job. I'm a journalist. I just want you to, you know, to promote Brussels better. And she said, well, I'm absolutely serious. You know, you've got the job if you want it. And I said, no, I don't. But she said, go away and sleep on it. And I did. I slept on it. And I'd actually at that point been a journalist for 12 years. And I'd written for national publications and I'd also written about 12 books by that stage. And I just thought to myself, well, actually, here's a new challenge, and I'm going to take it. So I went to work for the Belgian Tourist Office, and I was there for 2 years. And during that time, I helped Sirocco Forte was relaunching his hotel business after the collapse of Forte PLC, the huge conglomerate that his father had built up. And one of the hotels that he launched was the Amigo in Brussels. So he headhunted me to be his director of communications for his new company. And I went to work for him for 4 years, both looking after his personal PR and also looking after the hotel's PR, internal and external communications. And then I left him about 4 years ago. I'd had enough of London, and I moved to the Cotswolds and set up my own PR consultancy. And that's what I'm doing now, is really from the experience that I had working for Sirocco, I've become known as a specialist in luxury hotel PR. And virtually all my clients now are luxury hotels. None of them in England, all of them in Europe at the present time. So that's what I'm doing at the present moment. Thanks very much.
So Alec, who is an Italian graduate or a graduate of the Italian department, I should say. So over to you.
Yes, and as part of the Italian course, I got to spend a year in Italy. And whilst out there, I was already passionate about radio and broadcasting. I'm sort of one of those annoying people who always knew what he wanted to do. And on the radio out there were a couple of English guys who were DJs, had quite a high profile around the country, and I thought, well, I don't know anyone in broadcasting in Britain, I don't know the way in, but what they're doing sounds pretty cool. So I came back, finished the course, and then I did a bit of hospital radio. We didn't have a college radio then, which I guess you do now. And then went back to Italy to work in radio and basically blagged my way in. I sort of said, I was a DJ in London, I've done lots of radio, and I managed to get into local radio that way in Italy. That then led to various jobs, and I was out there for about a year and a half, had a whale of a time, worked in some pretty amazing places for some pretty amazing radio stations, but got paid pretty much nothing. So it got to the stage where I quite fancied actually being able to afford some food, my rent. My car was falling apart, so I had to take a sort of long, hard look at what I was doing and where I was going. And the truth was that the broadcasting industry over here was a lot more serious, let's say, and there was a chance of getting paid. So I came back and sort of worked my way in from the bottom there and started through local radio, and then from local radio got into regional telly, where I started doing sports journalism. And then in 2000 I went freelance, came to London and started working for Sky News, ITN and broadcasters like that. So that's probably not how to get into broadcasting, but that's how I did it. And I'm still doing it, so there we go. But there's a million ways of getting into it, and I'm sure we'll sort of cover those topics this evening.
Great. Okay, well, thank you very much indeed. So what we're going to do now is to take questions, and there are 2 ground rules I have to tell you about this. First of all, you need to wait for the microphone, because this event is being recorded, and if you are not on the microphone, you won't be on the tape. And the other thing is I'd like you to say who you are and maybe what you studied, though you don't have to say that. So who would like to ask any of the panelists a question? Who would like to get going? Down the front here.
Hiya.
Phone's off. Yeah. Okay, go ahead. Okay.
Is it on now?
Is the microphone on? Is that on? Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
My name is Georgia. I studied philosophy. And my question was, if you could tell us a bit more about the freelance process, like sort of how would you go about that? Do you write the story first, send it in, or like do you leave contacts first? How do you sort of become a freelance journalist?
Okay, should we take another question? Anyone like to ask, or should we? We could, yeah, we'll take a question over there.
Hi, I'm Yvonne. I studied archaeology a number of years ago. I just wanted to ask, is there a point where it's too late to get into journalism or broadcasting? I'm 26 myself, and I feel like that's kind of possibly getting to a bit late, as the sort of looking at how some people start from sort of straight after A-levels, get into training at newspapers and sort of take that route, and that's the route that people I know in the industry have kind of followed. So I was just wondering, yeah, is there a point where it's over?
Okay, so we'll have a go at those questions now. So it takes some more in a moment. We'll answer these two now. So anyone like to rise to the challenge of a
question first? Who here is working in broadcasting and journalism?
Hi, my name is Susanna, and I studied Hebrew and Jewish studies here at UCL, and then I went on to Cambridge, and I studied Jewish Christian relations in Cambridge at the Wolff Institute. And one of you said, which was quite interesting, that if you want to be a journalist, then you have to start writing. You just have to start writing. And my question is, how do you pitch your stories? How do you know what's important? How do you know that, maybe it doesn't only interest you, that you are not the only geek on this planet who is interested in that particular thing, but how do you know that it's gonna go out there and it's gonna speak to other people?
Okay, thank you. So let me ask the panelists, anyone like to reply first of all to the freelance question? How does that go? Right.
I mean, I think if you're freelancing anyway, I think the most important asset that you have is your ideas. If you've got a really good idea, then you're going to get to write the story because they need you to write it. If you're going to pitch stuff to editors where it's not very original, they've probably got staff writers who would write that sort of thing anyway. So I think if you've got really good ideas, don't write the story first, because it'll have to be in the style of the publication that you're writing it for. So especially if you haven't written for them before, they probably have guidelines and things. So you've got your idea, you have to find the right person to pitch it to, which can be quite hard, and that you sometimes have to be quite persistent. Call up if you have somebody's number at that publication, then call them up, and if they're the wrong person, just ask them if they can point you in the right direction, and just kind of keep going. And sometimes there's a certain day of the week where that's the day to get in touch with them, and you've tried on the wrong day when they're really busy and they're going to press or something and they won't speak to you, but don't take it personally and just try again another day and ask them when is a good time. And then pitch your idea to them, and then if they like it, then at that point they'll commission you to write it, and then you can write the story following their guidelines. And also they might see, there might be a particular angle of that story that they're interested in that maybe you didn't realise would be the most exciting thing. So I definitely wouldn't write the story before somebody's actually commissioned it.
What do you think about, so you said you'd call the editor. Pitching by email, is that a bad mistake?
It's not. Eventually you'd send your pitch in an email anyway, probably. But if you've never spoken to that person before and you just send them an email, the likelihood is that they're just going to be really busy, they might not have time to read it, and it'll just get lost in the bottom of their inbox. But if you send it and then you follow up with a phone call, or if you call them first and then they're interested and then you follow it through with an email, then it's just much more likely that somebody's actually going to pay attention to it, I think.
I don't think anyone replies to emails anymore. That's
Yeah.
my experience.
I have to say, I've got a friend who's a freelance travel writer, and she says she gets the best success rate by actually writing a letter to editors, because it's such a sort of unusual thing to do now.
I hadn't thought of that actually, as a possibility.
She gets a much better response rate if she just writes a letter.
Handwritten?
Handwritten.
Handwritten.
Sure
If you've got nice handwriting and a nice pen, you can do that. So I suppose the lesson there is the first thing you have to do is learn to sell yourself here, and that if you can't do that, then you've got an obstacle to it. So that's the freelance process. Is it ever too late to start? Is it ever too late to go into broadcasting, into journalism? Yeah, broadcasting or journalism?
No, it's never too late to get into journalism and broadcasting. Depends what you want to do. If you want to be the face of Sky Sports News, you need to be there when you're 22, especially if you're female. Sexist, but true. You've got a longer shelf life as a presenter if you're male. Again, unfair, but that's the way it is. But as a reporter or a producer, no, there's no time scale, I'd say.
What about for filmmaking? Is there a shelf life for sell-by date?
I know there's probably a shelf life for me. I mean, someone said to television directors, they die off, they're sort of put out to grass at 55. I think possibly some people are. That's much later, I think, is what you're talking about. You're wondering about getting into the business I think when you've still, oh Lord! I mean, I'm encouraged to say no. It doesn't matter what age you are, because you've got your ideas, and as we've just been talking about, a good idea on a page. If someone wants what you've got to sell, then they're not going to look at how many lines there are in your face before they take it. And if you're a broadcaster, you're as good as your ideas, and of course your contacts. It takes a while to build those up. But look, there's a shortage of talent, actually. There's a shortage of talent. People will tell you that there's lots of great actors out there dying for work who aren't working. Actually, there aren't a great deal of brilliant actors out there. And there's a lot of actors seeking work, but they're not that brilliant. And if you've got something to offer, whatever your age, offer it. Stick it on a piece of paper. Get out there and meet people. I think certain businesses in my line of work say, like, I don't know, certain areas of television, you walk into a room and you think, I'm just too old for this area, I just don't feel comfortable here. Meet people, go and move in that world and see how you feel. I don't think anyone is going to be ageist. It's quite often very self-selecting. People just don't feel they feel like this is too much of a young world. Certain areas, children's television, for instance, is a very young business. Documentaries is not. So I would like to say no.
Very encouraging. Okay, so we had a question. How do you match your geekiness with the world's geekiness? Is that roughly speaking? Do you want to just say again? So how to pitch your stories. So, Sue, would you like to?
Well, I think it is a case of matching your story to the right publication, because if you've got a story that's very specific, there will be a publication out there that is right for your story. I'd be very surprised if there wasn't. There are so many publications, whether they're online or in print now, and so I'm sure there's an outlet for your story, however kind of offbeat or quirky it might be. So it's just a question of doing the research and finding the right publication for your idea.
To identify with the publication altogether, like totally, do you need to? Because I did an internship at the Jerusalem Post.
Well, can we get the microphone back so we can pick you up?
I'm sorry, I'm taking over.
Go ahead.
So my other question was, do you need to identify yourself fully with the publication that you are writing for? Because I used to write for the Jerusalem Post, and I could see that there was a difference in political thinking between me and the editors. And although I liked the environment, I don't think I would be able to go there fully and be able to write for them.
Right. No,
do you know what I mean?
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I would say it was best if it's going to be, it's a political newspaper and it's the sort of internal office politics, and if you're going to be there full time, it would be best to be somewhere where you feel at home and fully suited to that environment. But if it's just on a freelance basis, it's much easier to kind of take a step back from that.
Can that be right? I don't know. I mean, is it really true that every Sun journalist feels like the Sun is their natural home?
Well, no, but I think if you're going to be there full time, 9 to 5, you want to be sort of, you don't want to be sort of fighting that feeling the whole time, oh, I hate what I'm doing, I'm doorstepping celebrities. I don't think that's the right environment for you.
Sure.
We do become part of whoever we're working for. If I turn up at a big story, I can tell you who the tabloid journalists are, and who works for ITN and who's there for Sky. I don't know why, but you can tell just by looking. So presumably that appearance is also just a manifestation of what's happening, intellectually as well.
Right, okay, so let's take some more. Question at the front. Yeah.
I'm Jennifer. I did 2 years of French and Russian and then switched to English literature. I have kind of a 2-part question, so bear with me. I did a lot of internships at national magazines, 6 or 7 placements, and I worked at Tatler for over a year for nothing alongside my degree. And when I graduated, they told me I wasn't qualified enough to be an intern. And then I got turned down for a position on a motoring newspaper. They told me I was perfect for the job, but I needed a degree in journalism, and that's why they'd gone with somebody who was less talented than me, but had a degree. And they actually told this to my face. And so about 2 months after I graduated, I got offered a job in marketing, which I felt was unfortunately too good an opportunity to get paid to turn down. So I guess my question was, now that I've gone into a different industry, which isn't my passion and isn't what I want to do, but pays the bills, do I have to go back to the bottom, having been an intern for nearly 3 years at almost 10 publications? Do I have to go back to being an intern to get into travel or motoring journalism, or is there a way to go from job to job, and do I need to go back and do a journalism degree?
Okay, so we've got those questions. I'm still writing. Yeah. Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Sarah. I studied Spanish and Latin American studies almost 6 years ago here. I now work as a campaigner at Amnesty International on Latin America. And I think my question is quite similar. I recently made a film, a documentary for Amnesty about migrants travelling through the country, and produced it and realised that's what I'd like to do, actually. And it's also related to is it too late question. Do I have to go back and work for free as an intern and be a runner in order to break into that industry?
Okay, thank you. So we'll take one more at the front here, and then we'll take the 3 together.
Hi, I'm Georgina. I did Italian and management and graduated in 2008. I'm actually already a journalist, but I would love to get into broadcasting. And my question is, I don't really have the time or the funds to sort of stop working on my current job. So would you say that it's a good thing to directly approach places like the BBC and Sky and ITN to get work experience at weekends, or try and learn a bit more about it, in the evenings and things like that? Because I generally find that there's a massive process to go through, which I'm a little bit further on to, so I can't go at a graduate level, and yet I'm not really experienced enough in anything broadcasting-wise to be able to apply for the jobs and actually get them.
Okay, thank you. Well, 3 actually rather similar questions about changing course.
I can answer that.
You can answer that last one? Yeah. Right. Okay.
I can't answer that, but I'll try.
Right.
And then you could probably do the production one.
I could have a go.
Okay.
What's your job at the moment?
I'm an editor of a student legal publication. I did law postgrad, so I wanted to write. So
you only graduated 3 years ago, didn't you? So it probably feels like a long time, but it's not.
Yeah.
And okay, your point is it's a financial thing that you can't start working for free.
Yeah, exactly.
But you could try working for free at weekends, maybe.
Yeah. And do you think I should then approach the people directly, sort of stations directly, to do that, or do I need to?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of also tied in with what you were asking about how you get. I mean, you were talking about print journalism. But how did you get work as a freelance broadcaster? It's really who you know, because it's who you know that gets you to see the person you need to speak to. And sending emails, I mean, producers at Sky are getting 200-300 emails a day, not all asking for work, but you know, they don't even get to see a lot of them. So it's a case of building up contacts and also sort of tenacity. So once you've got a name, you know, do email them and do phone them, and if they start getting annoyed, they'll let you know. But they did the same, so they sort of expect that really. But I mean, personally, is it too late to go back? I was doing radio when I was 28. So I've done 5 years of presenting on the radio. I was doing, admittedly it was all local radio, but I had my own show for a number of those years. I was doing drive time, and I thought, well, do I really want to go back a step and start making the tea? And in the end, that's what I did, and I only did it for 6 months. I just got a job literally making the tea and buying the biscuits, and for a reporter and a cameraman in a small news office. And then after 6 months, that led to other stuff, because all the time, all that is a foot in the door. Once you're there, you get to meet the right people, you get to find out who the right people are, and then you get to show your talent and skills.
Yep.
So
I think that's a lesson for many areas. The fact that it's, generally speaking, much easier to get promoted than it is to slot in at a high level. So you know, whether we were talking about publishing or retail, you know, get there and show what you're made of, and then people will want to talk to you, and you may get a chance. But it is a risk, and you're giving something up to do that if you're stepping backwards.
And also, it depends where you can make a judgment call that if some places you might have the opportunity to go there and maybe do an internship or something and get paid very little for it, but the likelihood is that after that, they will employ you, or they're likely to employ you. Other places, especially in this climate, people are actually replacing their staff with interns, and it's just kind of a cycle of just get another intern in and get another intern in, and the other one's out. So I think you should base that decision on what the prospects are in that particular place. And I left a sort of well-paid full-time job to go and do an internship at New Scientist magazine, because A, it was somewhere I really wanted to write for, and B, most of their staff have done an internship there, and that's kind of the way that people get jobs there. And then since then, they've pretty much been a constant source of employment for me since then. So I think you can make kind of a judgment call on whether it's worth it, and you have to be quite careful, I think.
Yes. I think it's very daunting when you're starting out trying to make your way into a business, and it seems to be that you just have to plant as many seeds, however small they are, in the time that you have. And always ask nicely, as Alec says. That was my philosophy. Always ask nicely, again and again, until you saw in their eyes that they really were pissed off with you. But I mean, if you've got that capability, if you're not, completely autistic and capable of reading other people's emotions, then I think you should be able to continue to do that and meet anybody. Impatience is always a problem, and it drives you mad and makes your hair fall out. It certainly made my hair fall out after the first 4 years of just getting nowhere, absolutely getting nowhere. And I think, yes, persistence, and nobody is too small to meet. You may not meet the person at the top, at the start, but if you meet even, and this is so obvious I suppose, but anybody that you know who has any connection whatsoever, and ask them for 10 minutes for a cup of tea. I couldn't give anybody a greater advice than that at this stage. Your chosen field, what you feel interested in. if you've already, for instance, made a documentary, you've already shown commitment, and that's impressive. And that will get you, that will open a door. I can guarantee you that. And once that door is open, get as much out of it whilst you're there. Speak to people you will have more context, I think, possibly than you realise through the experience that you've had. And if you do go in and make the tea or whatever, you will then have your foot in the door and be able to then speak to the people who need to move forward. My other suggestion for you is to seek a post as a researcher, because the skills of a researcher do require maturity. As in answer to your question, the lady who asked about her age, concerned that at 26 she would sort of go over the hill or something. Absolutely not. I didn't make a film of any quality whatsoever until I was 26, and then it took me until I was almost 30 before I directed my first episode of The Bill. That was the first time I actually got paid to do what I wanted to do. 29 years old, and I was 29 years old, right? I didn't get paid anything really up until that point. And luckily the DHSS was a bit more understanding in those days. But I did other jobs, but not what I really wanted to do. So I would encourage you to, in a way, answer your question, which do you do? I do both. I would get in and make the most of your film, get into a decent shape. If it isn't, you've already made it, but give it to people. And I think researching would be a good step for you.
Okay. Well, so we still have a question hanging about how important is a journalism degree. Does anyone have a view, Sue?
Well, I think, in all the time I've been in PR and journalism, it's split 50-50. 50% will always say, yes, I think, I'd rather employ somebody with a journalism degree, and the other 50% said, no, I'd rather somebody who starts at the grassroots and, has learnt on the job. So I think it really depends just, who you meet.
It was just about the writing side of things, because they made it sound like they needed the degree because they needed to be sure that I knew what I was doing. But when they read what I wrote, they told me it was fantastic. And then they told me I needed a degree in journalism. So I just got a bit confused because I'd made the contacts, and it was actually through one of my contacts that I got my current job. So it wasn't that I was just being really antisocial and not realising it. I've done everything right, and it just still ending up in the wrong place.
I'd say stuff and just
go
somewhere else.
I would say just carry on. You're on your road. You carry on in that road. If you're not going to do a degree, that doesn't mean that you can't carry on to be a journalist.
Okay, we'll take the next round of questions. So there's a question there from the gentleman, and then lady in front. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Hugo. I would like to ask you something. Is the crisis affecting the freedom of the press? The crisis in jobs?
I'm sorry, you're not speaking quite into the microphone. I didn't hear you.
So what I want to ask is if this crisis is affecting the freedom of the press.
Whether the crisis is affecting the freedom of the press. Okay, thank you. And in front of you, please. Yeah.
Thank you. This is a question actually to Catherine and Alec, if that's okay, because my story largely reflects what they've been through. I did a History of Art Masters at UCL. I worked at the Media Relations Department of a major gallery and was sending out press releases, and I thought I would rather be writing myself. And then I started a blog writing about art, reviewing exhibitions in London, and then for personal reasons had to go back to my native country, Bulgaria, to look after my mother. But in the process of doing that, and thanks to the blog, I got to cover the Venice Biennale this year for a specialized cultural newspaper. And that led to me getting published in the biggest daily newspaper in the country, again on a cultural topic. And now that I'm back in the UK, I want to replicate what I've been able to do there. And I was just wondering if you could elaborate a bit more on how you did things yourselves, especially in relation to not having any contacts, which Alec, you were talking about, and how to make the most of that experience, because it was in a different country after all, and it's in a different language.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And is there a third question for now? Further up the back there. Yeah.
Hello, my name is Anna Littler. I studied a Masters in Mother and Child Health, which was relevant to my previous career as I worked in the charity sector. But after 15 years decided to take the plunge and change career because I was passionate about drama and filmmaking. I'd started making films like the lady over there in the charity sector, but really wanted to do drama. I've made a number of shorts and have recently written a feature film which I've been making, managed to rope in about 150 people to either work behind the scenes or in front of the camera, and have learned so much about both writing and directing. It's a World War II drama called Blitz and Bananas, and we are hoping to have the premiere next April. But my question really for Harry is if you have any advice what I should do after the premiere, because I realise that my life might come to a standstill. And although I do already have a few contacts in television who I'm hoping are going to come and see the film, it's really what you would recommend I do afterwards. Thank you.
Okay, so as that's so directed, Harry, let's take them in reverse order. And Harry, are you able?
It really depends on what you want to do. I think it's a general answer to everyone is people say, what ought I do? And I think you have to, there is the practical things that you can do. About if you wanted to be a feature film director, you would do one thing. If you wanted actually to have try and get more regular income as a director, that would be another answer to your question. What do you want to do next?
TV is really my main interest, and I do have some scripts pending that I want to carry on working on, but I've really loved the directing side of it and would like to explore that more.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's interesting because we were talking about ageism earlier on, and Joanna Hogg, who recently, if you've seen her films, she came to film after, when she didn't, you've done something even more useful, which is you've had a sort of a proper interesting career before filmmaking, which I think is very encouraging, personally, particularly in film. I think there are people always, I think you've got to work as much as you can at the moment while the film is about to come out. And creating, I don't know what kind of distribution relationship you've got yet. Have you got anything for your film? Is it finished now?
We're still editing it.
Right, okay. And you think it'll be ready in the spring? Okay. Well, television is a very hungry mouth. There are a lot of people, a lot of directors obviously looking for work, so you are in a competitive market, but you have made a film of your own, and if it works and if it impresses people enough to get you an agent, there are a lot of shows, sort of start-up points for directors who, in soap operas and some of the daytime shows, which will take a chance on people on the basis of a short film. And if someone's cobbled together enough money and effort to make a feature film, that's impressive. Did you see you made some short films as well?
Yes.
Right. And did you have much success with them? Did you get them into any festivals or?
Yes, but just small festivals.
Yeah. Well, that's good. Have you approached any agents?
No, not yet.
Okay. Well, these are all practical questions that aren't necessarily going to be related to other people, but I'm very happy to talk to you about that afterwards. I think they'll probably be most useful.
Yeah. Okay, thank you. So, Catherine.
I think actually I was going to say in response to your question about how to how to get writing in the first place. Writing a blog is a brilliant way to do it, and partly because people will read it and you might get work off the back of it like you have, but also because you have to fill it. You have to go and do stuff and see things, and then you'll have ideas or you'll meet people there. So I think it sounds like you did a really good job of getting work for yourself when you were there, and now that you're back here, I think if you're interested in culture and that's what you want to do, I think it's good to have a specialism. I would say that because I just write about science, but it means that if you're working you're writing about a particular field, go to as many events as you can, find out about interesting events that maybe other people haven't heard of. Journalists who are staff for a publication have to be in the office most of the time. They'll get sent to cover big events, but they probably won't be able to go and cover a lot of interesting things that are happening, and they might not even know about them. So if you're a freelancer, you can go there and you can put yourself in the position where you've got access to stuff that other people maybe don't. Go to as much stuff as possible and just meet people and make contacts, and you know, you've got your field, your specialist field, so the more time you spend going to things, the more ideas you'll have, and the more you'll hear about interesting work, artists, and just make contact with them, and then pitch that to relevant publications. And I think as well, a general piece of advice is just read, if you're pitching stuff to a publication, make sure you've read it properly, and you know what they want, because there's no point in pitching stuff to the wrong place. As Sue said, there'll be a publication out there somewhere, but just make sure it's the right one, because there's no point in pitching something to the wrong place.
Thank you. Alec, anything to add?
I'll just say, it was Bulgaria, wasn't it, that you did some work in or for a publication there. So presumably you're still in touch with people there. So I would always, there's a route open there, because you spend most of your career in the media pushing against closed doors. So when you've got an open door, just keep going through it and just see where it takes you. So contact them, see what else there is. See if you can do, correspondent work from London. Is there any of those contacts? Do they know anyone in London?
I actually still work with them, but the pay is obviously not anywhere near anything that would allow me to live okay in London. So they do have a small number of contacts in London, but I think it's mostly political correspondence and people like that. Specialized.
Do they know people in TV stations or radio stations in Bulgaria? Could they put you in touch? Could you use your experience to cold call? Obviously, I don't know the culture in Bulgaria, so I don't know how it works. But can you pick up the phone and speak to someone you don't know in a newsroom somewhere in Bulgaria at a major broadcaster and say, look, this is who I am. I'm the London correspondent for such and such an organisation. Do you need some reports? I'll do them for free. And just, see where it takes you.
Okay, thank you. So, do any of us feel brave enough to answer the question about whether the crisis is affecting freedom of the press? Sue, right? Do you have a view on this?
Well, I don't. I suppose I work at the sort of fluffy end of the media world. I don't really get involved in economic and political side of it. But I suppose one way that it could be, the crisis could be affecting the freedom of the press is that the press are under a lot of stress at the moment, because there have been so many staff cuts on newspapers and magazines, and therefore I think they're in a position where they're taking much more of what they're fed. And they don't necessarily have time to check it or research around the subject and follow up. So to a degree, they are just, they're more accepting. They have to be, because they're under such time constraints. So that if a PR or a spin doctor or anybody sends them something, they may be more likely to take it as read and print it as it is. Whereas in the past, there would probably been a lot more research around the subject before it was printed. Yeah. But the journalists will probably tell you otherwise. But that's my feeling from where I'm sitting.
Does the crisis affect sport journalism?
It does. Yep. I was just saying that now that there's kind of a new sort of sector that's opened up in broadcast PR, which is in sports. For example, sailing, where there's a big event, newspapers and media companies don't have the budget to send reporters to cover sailing, however big the race is, except possibly for the America's Cup, but that's the pinnacle. So you've got all these other events below that, which which are still very important within the sport and still have big sponsors that need media coverage. So what do? They create a media unit, which is often a journalist and a producer and a cameraman. And as a journalist, you're used, they sort of go, well, there we go, get us on TV or get us in the newspapers. And I've done a few of those jobs. At first, it sort of, it went against everything that I thought I stood for. But then you think, well, it's only sport, and it pays the bills. And actually, it's quite a good challenge because it's a bit like looking for work. You pick up the phone, and obviously you know the person on the other end. You've got the contacts. You know the right person to phone on the right sports desk, and you know what sort of story will interest them because you've either worked for them already or you know the industry. And you say, look, you know, there's this British sailor. He's done this. Looks like he's going to win. Would you be interested in a piece? It's free to them. They go, yeah, great. Sponsor's name goes in. Job done. The organisation's happy. The press is happy. There are rules and regulations in broadcasting that mean you can't just put sponsor logos in shot and so on. It's quite restricted in this country. So that's a bit more difficult for TV. As far as radio and print's concerned, that's a whole sector that's opening up at the moment. So that's a good way in, actually.
So it's a type of product placement there, or at least a company placement.
Because you sort of have a lot of PR people who haven't worked in journalism and who come from a different angle, and they just don't understand why they can't get their stories published. And you look at it and you go, well, why on earth would anyone publish that story? Who cares? And they go, well, what do you mean? You know, we've signed a new sponsor. Exactly. So it's a case of using your experience as a journalist to turn that around into a better story.
But there was a hint in what you just said there about the crisis actually creating opportunities for people. Because it sounds like if the newspapers don't have the staff to cover an event, does that create a freelance opportunity for someone to go and cover things that the newspapers or magazines wouldn't be covering for themselves?
Yeah, I mean, freelancers are cheap. Hopefully not your daily rate, but they don't have to pay your tax, your national insurance, your pension, and all the rest of it. So there is an advantage to using freelancers. And I don't think it's a coincidence that we're all freelancers sitting here.
But for someone to get into, as getting a foot in the door, I mean, has the crisis created actually more opportunities for people to fill the gap that magazines and newspapers are not able to, or is that naive?
The problem, yeah, I see where you're going with that, but the problem then is you've got a lot of experienced journalists who are losing their jobs at the moment, who are going freelance because they have to. And now that the BBC Sport is moving up to Salford, the whole market has just been flooded with freelance journalists from the BBC who don't want to move north.
Okay. All right, so let's take another round. So more and more each time. Gentlemen, blue shirts, and we'll take the three from the side. Okay.
Hi, my name is Marcus Coleman. I did legal and political theory some years ago. I'm currently in a full-time job with long hours and lots of work, but I want to be writing, so I started a blog about a year ago, into which I've get a chance to maybe write 2 or 3 articles a month. And I was wondering whether you would recommend going down that road, just kind of building up a portfolio, if you will, and then trying to show it to people, and this is what I can do, and would you like to employ me, basically? Or go down the pitching route whenever I have an idea, rather than write it up into the blog, then get on the phone and try and pitch it to people. And then in relation to that, because I write about politics and economics, which is very fast moving, I'd be a bit worried if I start pitching it, the story will be yesterday's news by the time I get in contact with anybody. And finally, what if I pitch the same idea to a few publications and they all accept it? Is that kind of a faux pas that will just burn my bridges then in the end. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. And this lady here.
Hello panel, my name's Anique. I did psychology, I graduated last September. I did a psychology degree and left really wanting to do health and write about health issues. I did a placement in health psychology at Guy's and St Thomas's, which I really enjoyed. But obviously, although I did a BSc in the science world, psychology is for many still a BA. Logic tells me that it would be preferential for me to start writing about psychology issues or psychological issues, but my passion is health issues. What is the experience of the panel in terms of working with people who are writing about things that A, may have been an interest, or they haven't formally studied but have a passion for and an understanding for, because I work for the NHS at the moment, so I'm still in the medical realm, but not actually with a formal degree in medicine and sciences.
Thank you very much. And the last one this round.
Hi, my name is Ellen. I did a PhD in a very rare metabolic disorders that nobody's ever heard of, and there's no money. So I decided to row across the Atlantic to raise money and awareness for metabolic disorders. And in that, realised that there was far more interest in a naked nurse rowing across the Atlantic, and got more awareness for the diseases in that way than my PhD would ever have, will ever have achieved. Now I've gone on to use more kind of extreme sailing, rowing and sport to kind of try and convey what I do in my profession. Do you think there is a way of using kind of media as a forum to try and get stories that don't get attention otherwise by doing other things?
Very good. Thank you. So let's start with blogging versus pitching. Anyone like to? Catherine?
I think, it's tricky because, you know, you don't want to spend... It's good to write a blog, obviously, it gets you writing, but you don't want to spend all your time writing your blog because no one's really going to pay you to do that. I would say if you have an idea for something that's interesting, but it's not a big, you know, it's not big news, it's going to be quite a tough sell, write it on your blog. If you have something that you think, hang on, there's a story in this, then pitch it. I don't know, where do you work? Because if you're working in politics, do you have like a conflict of interest at all with?
No, not totally. Separate information management for law firms and stuff.
Okay. So, yeah, the question of whether something becomes old news, it's difficult because if you have got a full-time job, if you're writing something, different kinds of stories have a different turnaround. So if you're writing a news story, it's got to get out there really quickly, and you have to make yourself available to the editor, and you've got to be there. And you know, once you've filed your story to them, they're going to edit it, and then it's going to be sub-edited, and at each point they might come back with questions, and you've just got to be there and be able to just answer them straight away. So if you have got a full-time job, it can be hard to do that kind of news work, and if you're not there, you know, yeah, you have to be there to pitch it, otherwise it will become old news, and then if it is commissioned, then you've got to be there to answer their questions. Other thing, you know, like feature stories or opinion type stories are, you know, that aren't news, that sort of thing is easier to do in your spare time because they'll edit it, they'll have a much longer time frame for editing, and it doesn't really matter if you're not around. But I think if you've got something that you think sounds like an interesting story that other people might not know about, and obviously you've got contacts and things, then I would definitely pitch it before you write it on your blog. And then if you find people aren't interested in it, then certainly then write it up for your blog afterwards.
And then there was a fantasy question. That if you pitch it to 3 editors and they all want it.
Yeah, don't do that. You're just going to end up in masses of trouble. Pitch it to somebody who your preferred publication or whatever, and then and say to them, please, can you let me know as soon as possible because I've got other people interested, or I've got other people I want to pitch it to, and you can always say, if I haven't heard back from you by this point, then I'm going to take it elsewhere, and it might you might get more of a response if you do that. Okay,
so let's move to the extreme sailing question.
Do you know a lady who has rowed every ocean in the... That's it. You met her? You spoke to her?
going to suggest you did. She's got it sus, but there's still plenty she could do to raise awareness of what she does.
Ros managed to do it brilliantly because she tied in kind of looking after oceans and trying to clear plastic from the ocean. So her story tied in with actually what she's doing kind of thing. But because I was kind of trying to use it as extreme rowing, sailing to try and raise awareness for something quite different, you couldn't see that it would necessarily link in such a way that Ros managed
But
to do it.
you said you did get plenty of coverage.
Yeah, and we raised hundreds and thousands of pounds for charity, which is kind of why I'd like to try and continue doing it, really, because it was more effective than trying to find funding for my research.
So this sounds like a success story rather than a question, isn't it?
But it was, whether it was just a flash in a pan, one kind of thing, and then how you go on to sustain doing it.
Well, it's a PR. It's a PR question now.
Yeah. I mean, have you got more challenges planned?
Yeah.
So what are you doing next?
The Pacific next year, and then hopefully there's Northwest Passage after. So we've kind of got a.
Are you solo?
The Pacific's not the one after.
And do you have a main sponsor?
No, that's we're trying to find.
Okay, because I mean, often I think how the way it works with those things is that the main sponsor, the PR team of the main sponsor, will be the ones that really drum up the media coverage for you, because essentially they want to get the coverage for that.
But you're in a cycle where you don't get a sponsor if you don't get the coverage.
And there's a lot of people trying to pitch for the same thing now, really, in the fact that becoming an adventurer is becoming quite there's more and more fighting for the same sponsorship.
So maybe the idea is to get a story in a magazine about, you know, your planned adventure and the fact, and, you know, advertise the fact that you are looking for sponsors, and hope, you know, that might be a way of getting a sponsor who will then help you with the PR when you're actually doing the event to help you raise money. And you know, and I can help you with contacts for that.
And sometimes it's good to think small, so I'm not clear what you're trying to raise awareness of, and we can talk afterwards about it, but if you pitch it to the right magazine, and I don't know, magazine is about, am I the only one who didn't understand what it was about?
It's rare metabolic, it's children's disorders.
Okay, so you could do a write-up for a toddler, for, I don't know, Tesco's toddler magazine, for example, which they won't pay for, but it's probably read by hundreds of thousands of mums out there, and it just raises awareness. Ross keeps appearing in the Wiggly Wigglers catalogue, because they're one of her sponsors, and they do garden items for gardens, from benches to bird feeders to stuff like that, and they have a mailing list of hundreds of thousands of customers, and she's on the back page of that every time because they sponsor her. So that's the sort of thing.
Yeah. So go back to Catherine, actually, because there was a question about moving from one area to another, moving from training psychology to writing in health. That's not a million miles from your experience, is it?
It's not, and actually at New Scientist, obviously it's a science magazine that's for the general public. It's not, you know, a specialist magazine written for people who work in science, but some people who work there don't have a science background at all. One of my colleagues who's just started, she, I think, did art or something, and you know, she's editing. She's an editor. She'll have to edit stuff to do with physics. You know, she's never studied physics in her life, so I don't think that you necessarily have to have the background. And actually, sometimes it's an advantage because you can ask the questions that normal people who don't have that deep understanding will want to ask. So, you know, you're their voice, and you can get to the bottom of things that they'll want to know. So I don't think that you have to stick to writing about psychology, although, you know, there is a health side to psychology, so maybe there's things that you could write about there and kind of build up towards the side of health that you really want to write about. But I don't think that you should let that put you off.
Okay. Harry, anything else to add to this, or should we go on to the next?
Let's go on to the next.
Can I just ask a question of Catherine? Sorry. Catherine, when I started off as a journalist, obviously it's a very long time ago, and everything, you know, we were still using typewriters and printing. But when I was first setting off and trying to get commissions, I mean, I used to actually have to go in and show them what I'd written. Do editors still want to see something of what you've written before they would ever commission a pitch?
Yeah, I think that's the hardest thing, is trying to get a commission from a new editor that you've never worked for before. I think people do want to see that that you have some experience, and it is quite hard. But I think they also want people who can just deliver what they say they're going to deliver. And I think, like you were saying, there's actually a bit of a lack of talent in journalism. I think editors get quite frustrated sometimes that somebody sort of promises the goods and then they just don't deliver it, and they need people who can be really reliable and who can write in the first place, but then who can write the number of words they said they were going to write and not file something that's 10 times as long and kind of gone off on a tangent, who can deliver it on time, that it's the right tone for the publication, all this stuff that it sounds obvious, but some people just don't actually do that, or they get a commission and then they sort of say, oh, I'm not feeling very well, can I have an extension? And I think editors get quite tired of that quite quickly. So
yes,
yeah, they do want to see, obviously they want to see that you can write, but they also just want to know that you're reliable, and I think part of it is seeing that you've done the work before, so okay, I need to be able to deliver that.
Sure.
I agree. I think everything is about performance. It's not about what you want necessarily, it's what you want will lead you in the true career path, but with performance and delivery for whoever's commissioning you, whether it's a television broadcaster or a paper. And I would just add one thing about pitching, because we've talked about pitches a lot, that when I've pitched programs, and the last one that I pitched successfully, I mentioned it in one sentence. Brevity is everything, not just because people are busy, but because an idea that works, the better the idea is, the shorter the sentence necessary. As Einstein said, if you can't say something simply, you don't understand it. So when you're pitching an idea to somebody, make it brief. Never pitch anything longer than a page. A page is actually almost too long. A page, the discipline of working on an idea, and you will find this a tremendously important exercise. As you write down your ideas, they will probably first of all come across as a sprawl of 10 pages. Work on that idea, work on it, and then you'll understand more about it and yourself as that story just distills and distills like whiskey into one paragraph, or ideally one sentence. If you can tell it in one sentence, you're onto something.
So on that, there's a David Mamet play where someone is trying to pitch a film idea to another guy, and said, pitch it to me in one sentence. I can't, it's too complicated. Well, how are they going to put it in the TV guide? And I think, well, okay, so where do we go now? I think we go over this side. Is that it? Yes, please. Yep.
Hi, my name's Jennifer. I study human sciences, and I'm cheating really because I don't actually graduate till next year. But I was wondering if you could offer any advice or any tips for somebody with very little experience and no contacts in how to get into broadcasting.
Okay, thank you very much. Another question? Yes, please. Yeah, down here first, and then maybe we'll take 4 in this group, so take those 2 at the top.
Hello, my name is Lee, and I just graduated this year for mathematics and management studies. Because I always had a passion for PR and television, I'm going to do my master's in media and communications this year. I guess my question is, what do you think is the competitive advantage for people from other countries to join this industry? Because obviously we're from very different backgrounds and stuff. I'm just wondering if you can give us some advice on that.
Okay, thank you. And so we'll take 2 at the top.
Hi, my name's Tanya, and I graduated from the Spanish department with a Modern Iberian and Latin American Regional Studies degree in 2006. I believe you were in my lecture, because I haven't seen her for 5 years. I work in advertising at the moment, and I'd like to move into broadcasting, connected to the question of not having contacts, because I work for a regional agency. Are broadcasters or are new companies looking for more than a CV because it's more of a creative industry? Do you need like a show reel, or do you need examples of your work, or what do people anticipate, or what do people expect from new employees who have never been in there?
Okay, and behind you, please. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Siobhan. I graduated last year from European Social and Political Studies. And my question kind of relates to what Catherine said about switching from a paid job to taking an internship. Because currently I've got paid work as a sub-editor, but it's more in a sort of online advertising role. And I'd rather be doing it in a journalistic role. So I kind of wanted to ask how you gauged that there was a prospect from that internship, how you take somewhere. Because when I've done internships before, they haven't necessarily turned into jobs. And then equally whether experience in another field, but related to a journalistic field, whether it would transfer. So whether, you know, me sub-editing in this advertising arena translates effectively, or whether it really isn't worth that much in a journalistic sense.
Okay, thank you. So I'll let the panelists pick their question this time.
How do you get into broadcasting? So you're in your final year. Yeah. What do you want? This question as well for you. What do you want to do?
I don't know really. I love writing, and I've thought about a career in journalism, but I'm maybe edging towards broadcasting, but I just have no clue where to start. I'm just not sure really. I'm drifting.
Okay.
It's not very helpful, is it?
It's not. You've got to have a bit of a think. You've got to do some research. You've got to watch a lot of. It's television broadcasting. You're saying?
Yeah.
Right.
Do you want to
Radio?
present? Do you want to
Radio?
report? Do you want to produce?
I don't think I want to produce, either present or, yeah, probably present.
I think it's a kind of practical thing, isn't it? Until you often, I mean, you were saying that you were lucky that you knew what you wanted. I didn't know what field or aspect of it I wanted to get into. I knew I'd enjoyed it, and there was something about the connection just through that tube between me and the other person on the side that I wanted to feel a part of, and that's as far as it went for me. And I discovered by standing behind a camera and talking to someone in front of it that there was I suddenly found that I was standing where I was meant to be on this earth, and I wouldn't have discovered that had I not tried it. My feeling is that if you don't, confusion is not unreasonable. A lot of us are all confused. In fact, the first step is to accept the fact that you're confused and be honest and kind to yourself, be patient, and then roll your sleeves up and start looking into the possibilities. And I think that if you're really thinking about presenting, then obviously, I mean, there are media courses where you can present and develop media pieces. I don't know enough about journalist or broadcast journalism to know those courses, and then there are numerous media studies courses that are questionable, I would say, but some are better than others. You would know more about it than I would. But I would say that practical exploration on your part is what's needed. If you think you want to do some presenting, then find a way of getting in front of that camera.
The beauty of being around now and trying to get into broadcasting is that there are so many outlets. More and more of them don't pay you to do it, but that doesn't matter. I went off to Italy because I had no, other than hospital radio over here at the time, there was no email really, no way of finding out if I was going to be any good or if I was going to be good enough to survive in the industry. But now you've got all sorts of things. You've got cable TV. You'll have to move around the country possibly. The first few years are fairly transitory, moving about, just going where the jobs are. But even before that, there's plenty. You're obviously London-based. There are loads of cable channels loads of radio stations. Just go and give them a go.
And while you're still at university, is there like a UCL TV channel? When I was at Imperial, I tried presenting this cookery program that just went out to Imperial students, and then I realised I really didn't want to be a presenter. But it was a totally rubbish program. But at least while you're at university, there's all these things that are available to you that once you leave,
Because it's all about the more you develop in your career, the more you realise it's about confidence. And I said I always knew what I wanted to do, but I didn't know if I could do it. And those early jobs are a way of finding out that you can do it, and that gives you the confidence to then get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Okay, so let's take the next question, which was whether people from other countries, I think working in the UK, have a competitive advantage or any particular competitive advantage. Is there any insight that anyone can give?
I don't think we've got any competitive disadvantage, which is a start.
Yeah. Possibly as a commentator, it would be. So there's a sense in which you want to play up the type of cultural difference in commentating on events. That would be. Certainly, some people have done that.
So you know your country, you know its culture. Next time it's in the news, then you phone a broadcaster and you say to them, I'm a specialist in that field. If you need me to come in, I can come in.
And also, she's bilingual, presumably.
Sorry?
You're bilingual.
Oh, no.
You're not bilingual.
No, my first language was Chinese.
Yes, but you speak English as well.
Yeah, that counts. That
so
counts
you
as
speak
bilingual.
Mandarin, which we know is going to become increasingly important on the world stage and in world and international journalism. And I think you're sitting pretty, aren't you?
World economy. Go and look at financial channels. Go and have a world event.
Yeah.
BBC World have a studio in Singapore. I'm not saying go out there, but what I'm saying is that there's obviously an interest in the Far East from a financial business news point of view. So that might be a way.
And you've got a background in mathematics as well, so it's all falling into place.
Not a lot of journalists do. So
And I think from a PR point of view, I mean, I look at some of the. There are a lot of travel PR companies out there, and some of them, you can see they specialise in a particular area because they have a, I was looking at a website today, and all their clients are in Spain because obviously one of the founders is Spanish speaking. So I mean that's perfect if for a travel PR company that's trying to pick up some business in China. I mean they'd really love the fact that you do speak Mandarin because it's for the client. Relations, it's a fantastic asset.
There are jobs advertised by CCTV for people who speak fluent Chinese almost every week.
Is that BBC?
No, it's just the National Chinese channel.
CCTV, I thought you meant closed circuit TV. Well, yeah, that's sort of a bit downwardly ambitious, transcribing or something from the video store.
And those jobs are at Shepperton, they're not in China. So.
Right. Okay, so there was a question about presenting yourself and whether a CV is enough. I think the expectation was a CV isn't enough, but what in addition to a CV do you need?
Well, again, the question is what do you want to do?
I think with broadcasting, I'd like to be a reporter.
Could you have the microphone, please?
I think with the broadcasting, I'd like to be a correspondent or a reporter on that side of things. I have a semi-portfolio of work with writing, but what do you need to stand out?
You need a showreel. You need it online, so that if they decide to take 5 minutes to watch it, then they just click on the link, and it's there on the desktop. So make it as easy for them as possible. How do you get a showreel? It's the same advice really. go to your local cable news channel or local channel or whatever, student channel, and just stand in front of the camera and do a report. That's all you need to start with.
Okay.
Good. All right, so the last question in that round was, roughly speaking, how do you get out of advertising into journalism? Is it, or? Yeah. Can we have the microphone as well, please? Yeah.
If it's in the sort of copywriting aspect of advertising, is that any help basically in getting to journalism?
You're working as a sub-editor now?
Yeah.
Do you want to be a sub-editor in editorial, or do you want to be a journalist?
A sub-editor, I guess.
I think if you want to be a sub-editor, then any sub-editing experience you have is going to be really valuable. I think if you want to, become a journalist from being a sub-editor, it's quite a different set of skills. So that's going to be more difficult.
I mean, online newspapers is quite a good opportunity at the moment, because all the nationals have their online editions. And so there are sub-editing opportunities there. Obviously, there are people already doing these jobs, but there's a lot of freelance sub-editing. I suppose, in a way, it's that perennial question we've had about how many steps backwards do you take to go forwards? And I suppose the answer we've been given is it depends really, on how risk-averse you are, how much you need to keep the salary you've got, how much you're prepared to take a gamble.
And one of our sub-editors at New Scientist is, he used to work on Richard and Judy, and then he went to working in like advertising, copywriting kind of work, and then got a job as a sub-editor at New Scientist. So I don't think that I don't think you need to worry too much. It sounds like you've got quite good skills that you'd be able to transfer.
Okay.
I also think, sub-editing on, some of the national newspapers can actually be quite a good way in, because often the shifts are pretty antisocial hours, and people don't want to work them. So I certainly know I did some subbing shifts on the Sunday Times, and then that was a way to get into the desk was only about 10 meters away from the travel desk. So then I used to my coffee break pop over the travel desk and just say, oh, I've had this idea. Again, it's that getting this foot in the door and getting access to the right people through it.
Okay, so we've got time for one or two more questions. Have we exhausted? No, we haven't exhausted. So this lady down here at the front, and then we'll take a question there. Further forward, please, down here.
Hi panel, I studied French and German, graduated 2 years ago.
Could you hold the microphone a little closer? It's on, but... yeah.
Graduated 2 years ago. I work in PR at the moment. I started off in fashion and beauty PR, thought it was too fluffy, so went to B2B, ICT, realised that I think I want to go back to fashion and beauty, but I don't want to lose my contacts. How can I maintain that in case I decide to go freelance in, 5-10 years' time? Just wanted some advice on that.
Okay, maintaining contacts, and then at the edge of the row, about 2 rows, 3 rows back, please.
Hello, my name's Fionn. I graduated in law in 2007. I also work in PR at the moment, and a very small part of my job involves getting people on the radio. And through doing that, I've decided that I really enjoy the behind-the-scenes side, so the production of radio. And I was wondering, I presume the best thing to do is get experience, but again, because it's not being a presenter, is it worth going and doing kind of hospital radio and more kind of small-time radio as a producer and getting your way in? I would just be interested to know how it's best to do that.
Okay, thank you. I think we have time for one more if there's another. So, well, you began, you can finish. Okay.
Thanks. This is for Alec, really. You touched on sort of media law in terms of sponsorship. I know that's something with like a journalism degree that can be really useful. You learn about media law and what you're allowed to say and what you're not. Is that something that you guys have sort of learnt on the job, or would that be something that journalism degree would be really useful for?
Okay, so media law. How do you find out about media law?
I learnt it on the job. If I was doing news, at the level I'm at now, I wouldn't feel 100% confident. I didn't do a journalism degree. I wish I had. But you know, after I finished UCL, I just wanted to get on and work. My advice would be, once you've done your degree, just go and do a 12-month journalism course. There are some pretty good ones out there. There are a lot of rubbish ones as well, so you've got to do your research. And that's fine. That'll hold you in good stead. Just so that when you're sent to court to do a court case, you are 100% confident that what you're writing down or broadcasting is not going to get you locked up. And also you learn shorthand, which is quite useful.
Good. Sue, do you want to talk about keeping contacts, maintaining contacts?
Yes. Sorry, you used to be in fashion and beauty, and now you're doing what?
ICT and B2B.
Okay, and how long have you been doing that?
About 18 months.
But you're keen to switch back?
Yeah.
I mean, I think if you switch back now, the contacts are still going to be there, but do you want to keep the current contacts?
I've got a mix. I've got some national contacts that I want to maintain, but I don't know how I'm going to maintain them from going back to fashion and beauty.
I mean, I suppose the point is, if you decided that fashion and beauty is where you really want to be, it probably doesn't matter because they're completely in the wrong field anyway. I mean, I have always been in travel PR, so my contacts have always pretty much been that field. But of course, sometimes I actually did some maternity cover too for SM Brussels Airlines, and so those were very much aviation contacts. I mean, I just keep that, you know, that database there. And you know, whenever I've moved jobs, I've kind of emailed them and said that I'm moving on, so that they keep my contact details at least. And otherwise, you know, my database, I update it on a daily basis, because the media change so frequently, and they change jobs, and there are new journalists and there are new magazines. So I mean, it's one of the most challenging aspects actually I find of the day-to-day job, is keeping your database up to date. And I think it's just an ongoing process.
Is that your experience too, of having to keep your contact list up to date all the time? Or I mean, you moved areas. Have you?
I don't. I suppose I haven't really moved areas much. I mean, it's very strange, isn't it? Because networking is something I've always hated doing. I hate the word.
And what is this event called?
I know, and I welcome you to come up to me if you want to think I've got anything sensible to suggest. But but it's you've got to do it. It's good relationships. Can I say something about relationships? Because I think the reason why I don't like the word networking is it sounds so impoverished morally and mentally. It sounds like I'm working the room, and Lord knows I've seen people work a room and it's not a pretty sight. What you're doing is making friends, and those have to be real friendships actually, or at least real working friendships. I said there's a difference between a friendship and a good working relationship. A good working relationship is someone who commits and follows their commitments, who will do what they say they'll do, who is not two-faced, who is not clearly Machiavellian. It's not attractive to look like, to say, I will do anything, and be like one of those people on Apprentice who will say, Sir Alan, I will kill my own grandmother for this job. I think people are attracted, as they are in the rest of the world, as in the work life, with people they feel comfortable with, they want to spend time with, and who are honest with them. Keeping relationships has not been very difficult for me. Making relationships is often difficult because it takes a time to find people with whom you do get on. You may go in your first working experiences, your first jobs, you may come up against some people, they may be unpleasant or they just may not be your chemistry. And you sit there and you're facing a boss and you don't know how to speak to them and you think it's all your fault. And actually it's not, you just haven't found that working relationship. And I think that probably, I don't know what the rest of the panel think, but I think that my career has been built on about 5 key good relationships with people that I liked, who I got on with, and who I didn't let down, and who I was emotionally honest with. And maintaining those relationships, particularly with one producer, Tony Garnett, who has been my great supporter for most of my career. I work with him again and again, and the only other person who's ever worked with him more than 3 times is Ken Loach. And we hit it off. If you find someone with whom you have a good relationship, you keep up with those people. You marry them if necessary. Keep on good terms with people with whom you have chemistry, because those genuinely strong relationships don't come along that often, and they are the people that will keep you going in your career.
Thank you. So we still have one question to answer, which is roughly, is hospital radio the way out of PR and into radio production? So that sounds like one for you, Alec.
Yeah, it's tough because if you look at the market, the radio market, it's in pretty bad shape at the moment. In the private sector, I'm just trying to think. You've got TalkSport. They have producers. They're producing live shows rather than out producing documentaries and so on. Other than that, I can't think of any other radio station that produces anything.
But, I mean, more for like the day-to-day production of like a show, like a breakfast radio show or a mid-morning show. They have production.
Yeah. And that's what you want to do, is it?
Maybe.
Well, then it is. Yes. Then it is. Then go. Find a hospital radio or a college radio or community radio.
Are there hospital radios anymore, or factory radios? They still go. Right. Okay, they exist. They exist. Right. So there's the answer.
Have you thought about podcasting as well? Because that's getting massive now, and that's something that you can do yourself. All you need is a decent recorder and a piece of editing software. Who do you work for now? Okay, because I don't know if there's any opportunity for you to persuade them to let you do a podcast, or I don't know, but that's a good way of kind of getting a bit of experience.
Yeah. Without them picking up the hint that this is your way out of the company. Yeah.
You'll get promoted, don't they? Oh, that's a really good idea. The BBC is the place. If you want to be a heavyweight radio producer, then the BBC is the place to go. But kind of podcasts and so on, I just want to make a point that I've been waffling on about broadcasting and what I've done and, this is what you should do. I have no idea where broadcasting is going to be in 5 years' time, let alone 10 or 20 years' time. I don't know if TV is even going to exist in its current form. So don't blame me. If 5 years from now, you're all working on the internet, because that may well be the case.
I think that's a good point, actually, that journalists are kind of expected more and more to have a different set of skills. And if you know how to record a radio interview, an audio interview and edit it, put together, you don't have to have massively high quality video for the internet. So if you can do those things at the moment, it's really advantageous, and I think it's just going to become more so because that's where things seem to be going, I think.
Okay. Well, I'm afraid we're out of time in this room, but there are drinks and probably some crisps waiting for us in the lobby. So I've really enjoyed the session, and I hope you all have too, and will join with me in thanking our panellists.